Good morning, everyone. So just a quick intro to anyone who I've not met previously. So I'm Luke Foster. I'm one of the solutions architect at Barker's. I'm joined by a couple of my colleagues, Stephen and Matt, and we'll be taking you through our release management webinar today. So for those of you who have been on a previous one, it'll follow the same sort of format for it. But for anyone who's not been on one of our webinars previously, what we like to do is at each release that Coupa sends out, we take a quick look through the notes and the different changes that Coupa are bringing in, and we like to try and pull out some of the key ones or the areas that we think will have the biggest impact on some of your end users, and just go through a quick sort of 30-minute session, just giving you a bit of an overview of some of them. So it can be quite a lot to digest when you get these notes. So hopefully these sessions are quite useful to you to just sort of bring to life some of these changes, and hopefully they can have an impact on what you do in Coupa and how you use it. So today we've got quite a range of different areas that we'll be focusing on. So we'll be looking at some of the power-ups and also the core system. So we've got some changes to sourcing and contracts. So we've got the sourcing and CLMS power up. So for anyone who's using them, some nice changes there. Within procurement, we've got some big changes to the way items are managed. So again, for end users, some big changes that will impact the way they see items and the way they interact with them. So we'll take a look through that. The view of suppliers as well within supplier management has changed quite dramatically. So again, I think Coupa is trying to drive this refreshed sort of view and easier visibility of data within the system, and we've got some nice changes there. And then we'll finish off with some invoicing and pay changes that have come into play. We'll finish off the session with a quick slide on how to prepare for new releases. So for some of our newer clients or people around the businesses who are managing releases, perhaps it's your first one. We'll give you some sort of tips and tricks on what to sort of be thinking about as these releases come into play, and hopefully that'll be of some use. And then we've also got a questions and answers session. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end just to field any questions that you might have on the releases that we've discussed. But there is also the questions and answers button at the top of the page if you want to type in any questions and answers as we go through. And we'll review them at the end of the session. As always, the session's recorded. So if there's anyone who's not been able to make it, or any of your team members who'd like to share this with, there'll be a recording that gets uploaded onto the internet later on for you to share. So we'll kick off with sourcing. So again, this is relating to the sourcing power up. So anyone who's utilizing the sourcing feature and has that abilities in the system, there's a new change coming in which relates to the analysis of bids. So what Coupa have introduced is this bid summary tab at the end of your sourcing events. So as you're completing your events, it's giving you a much cleaner and easier visibility of some of the high level comparisons and overviews of elements of that sourcing event. It's on by default, so it's a feature that will be turned on once it goes live, the release. And there's no key changes that need to be made in relation to roles or permissions. And if I just quickly flip into an instance, we'll have a quick look at how it looks. So in preparation of this webinar, I've done a very quick stationary RFP within our sourcing list. If I just open it up. I've done a really simple 3-supplier RFP. We've done all of our responses, so the suppliers have responded to a number of items, and we've also completed some forms which have been evaluated and marked. And as you can see now, we've got this nice bid summary tab, which starts to collate a lot of this information on the event. So we can see I took it all the way to award, so we can see where the RFP has been awarded to and what the amount was. We've then got some comparisons and analysis of the values and the savings that it's driving. We've got our commercial evaluation or technical evaluation as well. So this is related to the forms if we're responding to questionnaires and then marking those questionnaires. And then we've also got a nice summary of the approvals as well. So we can see a nice audit history of where this source event's gone through. So we had a launch approval, and then we've also got an award approval. And it's currently sat in this award approval. We've made the award, and it's now with procurement to award. So a nice clean page that just gives you that little bit of a higher level overview of where source events are sitting and the comparisons against the suppliers. So quite a nice feature for anyone with sourcing. If we jump into CLMS next, so within contracts, anyone who's got the CLMS or CLM advanced power apps, you'll probably be aware of already of the concept of hierarchies within contracts, and you can have parents and child hierarchies. What Coupa's now introduced is this ability to go down to 4 levels of hierarchy, and added another tab to review where contracts are linked and what position that they're in. And again, if I jump into our instance, in preparation for the webinar, I've done some contracts or made some contracts in the instance. So we've got a master contract, a child that sits underneath it, and then we've got some schedules of work against that child. So we've gone down to 3 levels of hierarchy. If we go into the contract, you can see we've now got this nice hierarchy tab with a real nice clean and high level overview of the relationships between these contracts. So what's nice is you can also see what status these contracts are in. So some of them are completed, published, we've got a schedule of work that's in draft. But again, it gives you a real nice overview of how these contracts are linked together using this new hierarchy functionality. We also have some information to the side as well, and once obviously we're in a demonstration system, so we don't have any live data, but once you start processing orders and invoices, you'll start to see values assigned to the contracts, and it'll add into here. And it also gives you a cumulative one as well against the contracts. So you've got a real nice overview of spend against those contracts. Moving back to the core system, so this will be more relevant to everyone who's got core and is using procurement to raise requisitions. There's some new changes that have come into play in relation to items and also how items are managed. So you can see here the first change is that within our item itself, so this is predominantly going to be an impact for your end users when you're using your hosted catalogs. There's a new view which is giving us a bit more information and a bit of a cleaner view of that item. Changes to the way the pictures are shown, but the intention here is to just make it a little bit of a nicer view for those end users. So not quite a nice change that's going to impact a lot of end users. What's also been introduced is this concept of a split of item itself and a split of the supplier information against an item. So you'll see here we've got a drop down for different suppliers. And what that means is there's a slight change to the way that items are managed. So for those procurement teams or those users who are managing items and managing your catalogs, there's now this concept of an item and a supplier item, which has been brought into Coupa. And we'll have a look at what that means in the system in a moment. Again, both of these the changes are on by default. There's some slight changes to roles and permissions on how you manage items now, and this is directly related to this supplier item. And there's a couple of permissions that are now added to enable a user to utilize or be able to change supplier item details. This for standard roles, this will change automatically, but anyone with custom roles who are using those custom roles for people who are managing items, there may be some slight changes or permissions that you'll need to add to make sure they've got those abilities. If we go into the system, we've got a pre-prepared mouse here, which is in one of our catalogs. If we let that load up, you can see now we've got this nice clean overview of the item for the end users, and we can add different bits of information and reviews onto the item. We've now got this concept of suppliers under the item. So if you've got suppliers that provide the same item, potentially different prices, we've got our ability to add preferred suppliers. That one's the cheapest, but we can try to direct users to the preferred supplier of that item. But again, it's only really relevant if you've got providers that are providing the same item. What that means from a management perspective or a maintenance perspective is if we go into our setup of items now, you can see we've got our items and then we've got our supplier items. So there's the items down here are the specific item, and we could hold information on that item, you know, the manufacturer number and bits of information related to it. But we've now got this supplier items within here as well. And if we edit the supplier items, see we've got our name, description, our actual item itself, but we've got this supplier item where we've got our two different companies. So effectively we're maintaining the details of what we're buying in the item details, but then we're maintaining pricing and information related to what the supplier is providing for that item in here. The key one is obviously price. So you might have different prices on different suppliers for the same item. And this is where that change to the permissions comes in, because you can limit who's able to make the changes to the supplier information on the item, but still enable them to make changes to the item itself. And you'll need to make sure if you've got any custom fields that those permissions are enabled for those users. I'll pass over to Matt now. He's going to take on the next releases. So over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Luke. Let me just take over the screen quickly. Right, and yeah, as Luke said, I'll be taking you through some of the supply management updates first, and then I'll move on to some invoicing updates in this release. So like I said, we've got the supplier management updates first. These updates are mostly focused on the user experience, and as you'll see in the demo later, the supplier management areas are a lot more intuitive and user-friendly for the users. So on the left here, firstly, we've got the redesign of the supplier landing page. So when you first click on that suppliers tab, that first landing page has had a significant redesign. You now get a much more visual, like dashboard style view with widgets. So you can see things like suppliers by spend and by health as well. I'll show you that later in the demo. This is on by default. It won't affect your roles and permissions, and it won't affect your integrations either. Now, on the right of this slide, we've also got the new Supplier 360. So this brings together all of your suppliers' key information into a single unified profile. So if you're on the landing page and you click on an individual supplier, the page that it takes you now is a lot more visual and has a lot more information in there, so you won't have to click between pages. This is not on by default, and you will need to get it enabled. It won't affect your roles and permissions, and it won't affect your integrations either. So let's have a look at these supply management updates in the system real quick. So like I said, if I click on this suppliers tab, it brings me to the new supplier landing page. So like I said, you can see all these widgets here. You can see suppliers by spend, by status as well. You can see how many active suppliers you have, how many are in draft, etc. For each of these widgets here, you can choose which ones you want to see. So if I click on this drop down and go to dashboard preferences, you can select which widgets you want to see. And if you click save, it'll save those changes. So it has some customization with it as well. And now for the Supplier 360, if I go to one supplier, let's say Mighty, and I click on it, this is the new Supplier 360 page. So at the top here, you can see your tabs such as current activities. You can see your spend for this supplier as well. And you can see the supplier health as well. On the left-hand side here, you've also still got the supplier record, obviously. So if I click on that, this is where all your supplier details are. For example, the name, status, any sort of contact details and addresses are still here as well. So this is, like I said, this is all on one page, and it stops you from clicking through to different pages as well. And I guess lastly, the last update on the Supplier 360 is this Actions tab. So if I click on this Actions tab here, there's a drop down and you can say request a review. You can do an internal update from here as well. It's just a bit more user friendly for you all. So I'm going to go back and cover invoicing now. So the first invoicing update we have is this new convert lines for quantity and amount types. So this one is specifically for Invoice Smash. You can basically now set up rules to automatically convert invoice lines between amount and quantity types for specific suppliers. This is on by default. It won't affect your roles and permissions, and it won't affect your integrations either. Now, the second update we've got on this page is this new bulk edit invoice lines. This is quite a useful update as well. So previously, if you needed to edit multiple lines on an invoice, you'd have to sort of go and do them one by one, but now you can select multiple lines and you can copy, delete, or edit them all in one go just from that invoices page. So I'll show you what this looks like on the system as well. So firstly, for this Invoice Smash update, this is an invoice that we uploaded via Invoice Smash. So you can see there's a PDF attached. It's gone through the invoice inbox. If I scroll down to the lines, and if I click on this blue arrow, this is the new sort of text box that pops up to automate your Invoice Smash line types. So if a particular supplier always sends quantity-based invoices, but your POs are amount-based, you can set a rule once and Coupa will handle that conversion every time automatically without any manual intervention. So that's quite a useful one for Invoice Smash. And now if we look at the new bulk edit options on an invoice, this is an invoice I created just for this webinar. And if I scroll down to the line section, you'll see on the left-hand side of each line, there's a little checkbox. So if I go and select 2 lines out of the 4, I can either copy them or delete them, like I said. But yeah, the most useful one will probably be this new edit selected. So if I click on the edit selected, you can now select a commodity. You can select your chart of accounts as well for these 2 lines. And you can also select a VAT code and a VAT rate. So if I click on this standard rate, 20%, sorry, click on the standard rate, press apply. Bear with me, and you can see it's only updated those 2 lines out of the 4. So those first 2 lines will now have a VAT code and a VAT rate attached to them, whereas this last 2 lines don't. So that's just a useful feature in this update for invoicing. And if I go back to our slides now, we've just got some final e-invoicing updates to cover. So firstly, for Poland, the Polish government is moving to a new sort of certificate-based authentication system. They're calling it the KSEF, and Coupa now supports this, meaning you can upload your certificates directly into Coupa invoicing ahead of any deadline. If you operate in Poland, I'd recommend not leaving this until January 2027, which is when it will come into effect. And secondly, for France, a similar update here. The French government is also requiring businesses to exchange invoices electronically through an official government platform. And Coupa has also built this compliance in automatically. So it will register your electronic address, handle all the mandatory invoice formats, etc. So I guess these two updates are around Coupa's commitment to supporting e-invoicing. So as we're seeing more and more countries adopt e-invoicing, Coupa will be able to support these requirements. And that's it for me. And that is a nice segue into Coupa Pay, which will be covered by Steve.
Take over the screen. So yeah, as Matt said, I'm just going to cover some updates around Coupa Pay now. So the first of the updates is the ability to enable a single payment per invoice. So currently, if you are using Coupa Pay and you're making payments out to suppliers, Coupa will, when you create a batch, group all the invoices for a supplier and send out a single payment. And that is potentially the way you want to operate with many of your suppliers. However, we do see certain use cases where customers want to send out a payment per invoice, and you've now got the ability to do that. So just going to have a look in the system on what that looks like. So first of all, if we go to the supplier section and we edit our supplier and scroll down to the payments section within the supplier page, we'll see that Coupa have now added in the ability to enable a single payment per invoice. So if you do want to utilize this, it's already on by default. There's no impact on the roles, etc., but you do need just to enable it for those suppliers where it might be relevant. Once we've added the tick box to the supplier, we'll just jump into the payments section and see what this looks like. So I'm just going to create a batch with some invoices for that supplier we were just looking at. And when I do that, we'll see that Coupa, rather than creating a single payment out to this supplier, has now generated 3 separate payments. So they'll get a payment, an individual payment for each invoice into their bank. So a nice, simple feature to enable if it is of use to you. And we're just going to submit that now into the payment approval process. So next is we want to have a look at the next update, which is the ability to withdraw payment batches once they're submitted. So up until now, if you have submitted a payment batch into the approval process and then you notice maybe you need to make a change, maybe you need to withdraw a payment from the batch, you weren't able just to simply withdraw that. You'd have had to contact whoever it's currently sat with for approval and ask them to reject it back to you to get that back into that draft status, so then you can make any of the required changes. Coupa have now added the ability to withdraw those payment batches instead, making it a bit easier to manage. And as we can see, this was the batch I've just submitted, and I've now got this withdraw payment batch action available. Again, this is on by default, so you don't need to make any changes to the system. There's no change you need to make to roles and permissions. It'll just be there for those users who have already got the relevant either payment processor or payment admin roles in the system. As you can see, once I've withdrawn it, we've got it back into draft, and then we can go and do whatever we need to do, maybe delete one of the payments out and resubmit it. So finally, just moving on to an upgrade that relates to Coupa Pay for expenses. So in terms of setting up those employee payment accounts, the bank details used for the employees when you're making payments for expenses through Coupa Pay, it currently needs to be managed by the user. They would have to, when they first log into Coupa, go in and enter their bank details. We've now got the ability to bulk upload those bank details into the system. So in certain use cases, maybe you've got a large group of users coming on board, or maybe your joiners process, they're already providing those bank details and you just want to get those added into the system ahead of time. You can now do this via the bulk upload function, rather than having to ask those users to set those bank details up when they first log into Coupa. So in terms of this feature, it isn't on by default, and it's not something you can just turn on yourself. You will need to raise a ticket with Coupa Support if you do want to utilize this. However, once it's enabled by them, there's no additional sort of settings or role changes you'll need to do. Those expense payment admins will already have the permissions required to do this. So if we do enable it, and if we go into our employee payment account section in the system, we'll see that rather than having to just being able to see them, we'll have the bulk upload feature within that more function. If you're familiar with bulk loading supplier payment accounts, you'll know that it's quite a specific format, so it's definitely worth having a look at that format if you want to utilize that, doing some testing around how that format needs to be configured in the file to make sure it loads successfully. But once you've managed to work through that, it's quite an easy process to manage. So that's all the features we wanted to go through today. So now just want to talk a little bit about how best to prepare for the upgrades. So key thing first is, the planning, making sure you're aware of when the upgrades are coming in place. So I'm sure you'll be aware that you'll have the upgrade first come into your test system and then into your production instance at a later date. So being aware of the dates when those are happening. Planning when to review those release notes, identify the changes that you think might be relevant to you. Once you've done that, we'd really recommend having a look at these in the test system first. Obviously, either the ones we've shown you are on by default, they'll just be there to have a look at, or if they do need to be enabled, it's probably because Coupa recognises there's an impact in the way the system will operate when you enable it. So it's really worth testing what those look like first. Once you've done that testing and you decided you're going to enable the feature or you're going to utilise it, it's worth updating any training and documentation and just communicating these changes out to users so they're aware of it ahead of time. And finally, making sure that when you do go live with these changes, just being able to support the users if they have any issues with those changes in the system. So now just want to move on to the Q&A. So just going to have a look. I think I can see there's already a couple of questions that users have asked, but if you haven't already, feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A section now, and we'll pick those up. So the first one, so if we don't currently have the contract hierarchy set and turned on, we'll be able to use the new multi-contract hierarchy. Luke, maybe you can take that.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, you do. So it works in the same way. So within company information, you've got that tick box to allow management hierarchy currently, and it works the same. So you need to have that enabled for this new hierarchy to also function. It's effectively just a bolt on to that existing abilities in the system.
Yes, Luke. And then the next one, hi Matt, can I revert back to the old supplier table view, Matt?
Yes, you absolutely can. I probably should have demoed that earlier, but yeah, in the top right of the supplier landing page, there'll be a button that says switch view. So you can switch back to the old table view if you'd like as well.
Cheers, Matt. I think that's all of the Q&As that we've got. If you do think of anything else later, please feel free to reach out to us. I'm just going to put on the screen now a QR code for our delivery director, Matt Hardacre's diary, if you do want to set up a call and talk through any support you needed. And obviously, I know a lot of you guys already know our existing customers, so also feel free to reach out to us if you are looking for any support around any of the new features that we've discussed in the session today. That's the end of our webinar today. Thank you for joining, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.